Right now we are in a town called Hostomel, and this is where the war started. So in the beginning, like on 24th of February last year, they came with a lot of, the Russians came with a lot of helicopters. They came with a big airborne troop. They landed there, I think it was multiple battalions. They landed in the airport and tried to take the airport to prepare the attack on Kyiv. This was the first big offensive action in the war, and it was like a real threat to Ukraine, to the capital. They almost, people in the Western world thought, okay, it's over now. In the night there was heavy fighting around the airport, and the Ukrainians actually managed to take it back and to defeat the invaders. And this was a big symbol for Ukraine and for the world, and also for the Russians. It showed that Ukraine was ready to defend their country and that they wouldn't just give up, even though they were faced with everything, like with helicopters shooting at their troops, with airplanes, and they just had infantry. They had a few tanks and artillery pieces, and they defended this area successfully. But on the next day, the Russians came with mechanized forces. They took the airport, and the battle shifted to this town. So yeah, a lot of stuff was destroyed here. They're rebuilding it, but it's still, you can still see some battle damage, and it's not really completely rebuilt. The thing is, after this battle, they went on to Bucha and Irpin, and we are going to these places, and we're going to tell you what happened there. So we're in Bucha now. After the Russians fought in Hostomel, they came to this city. It was also part of the advance on Kyiv. They came here with paratroopers and also with a brigade of the motorized rifles. In Bucha there was heavy fighting, but eventually the city was taken by Russia. One of the worst war crimes actually that happened in this war, because when the Russians took the city, they started killing civilians indiscriminately. Some people were arrested for no reason and disappeared or were tortured. Others were just shot on the open street. So the Bucha massacre was really shocking to the Ukrainians and the international community, and it showed that Russian soldiers were ready to commit the worst war crimes. Actually, one of the brigades which was involved in these crimes got decorated by Putin himself. So it's not that the soldiers just acted on their own behalf, they were praised for it by the Russian government, and therefore we can conclude that these crimes are something that Russia wants them to commit, maybe to create fear or to intimidate the Ukrainian population. Luckily it didn't work, and it just strengthened the resolve of the people to defend themselves. Right now the city looks really peaceful, and a lot of buildings have been rebuilt. The thing is, every time I've been to Bucha and Irpin, it looked differently. So the first time there was a lot of ruins, everything was destroyed. Second time you could already see more rebuilding. Some of the destroyed buildings were, they were removed, others were created. And so it's in a constant flux. And what you always have in this war is this kind of weird thing where on the one hand you might hear, let's say for example in Kherson, you hear booms, explosions, you're under artillery fire, but then 10 minutes later it's just normal life. It just looks like you're in a place somewhere in Germany or in the United States, and it's just normal life. So it's this kind of back and forth between the extreme and the ordinary, and you just have to get used to it. So this street is the street where Russia advanced all of its vehicles from Bucha to Irpin, and it's where these famous images are from, where you can see all of the burned out infantry fighting vehicles and tanks. It's exactly this street, and it just goes from here, from Bucha to Irpin, where we're going now. And now they're destroying all of these buildings to build something new. On the one hand, for the residents, it's obviously very good because they get new housing, but also part of history is destroyed and part of kind of evidence, like visual, like kinetic evidence for the Russian invasion is being dismantled. Where, for example, here you can see, okay, it's an artillery shell that came from the top, so it's burned on the top. In other cases, you can see something like if you see a building and you have this one window where there's like a big explosion, then it's probable that they put like a machine gun team or snipers, anti-tank missiles there, and someone used the tank to shoot it. So if you really look closely, you can even like recreate what happened in a specific place. Like where this kind of Banksy thing was taken from the building we've seen before, and it was part of a building that was destroyed and stuff, and now they just took this part of the wall and put it somewhere else, and now it's here. Yeah. So one question is, why is Irpin much more fucked up and destroyed and everything than Bucha? The reason is simple, because the Russians were in Bucha and the Ukrainians always held some parts of Irpin. So the Ukrainians didn't want to use a lot of artillery on their own city, so they were careful not to shoot at Bucha too much. But the Russians were just like shooting with everything they could, and therefore Irpin has more destruction than Bucha. Infantry fighting vehicle. This is the arena. Look at this. How it looks. Really like butter, right? Okay, this is the forests in Moshchun, and these forests are actually really dangerous because there's still mines there, and the demining operations are happening all over Ukraine, but it might take years or even decades until all of the mines are removed. And so the Battle of Moshchun was actually a really important battle in the beginning of the war, part of the defense of Kyiv, and the 72nd Brigade defended this area successfully against multiple Russian attacks. When I was here last summer, most of the buildings were destroyed, and you could see like grad rockets in the ground. They weren't demined at all, so people were still living here in houses which are partly destroyed. You could see these rockets everywhere, and I think the most sad thing I saw actually was a child, and we were with this family. We were helping them to do some repairs and stuff. And then we went to the kitchen, and the child got this kind of psychological breakdown when he saw, like, it was really, really small boy, when he saw this table in the kitchen, and he was telling us that he's always hiding under this table when there's like boom boom outside. So these civilians were in the city while the fighting was raging on here.